Good morning, everybody. My name is Sam Kassoumeh. I'm a co-founder of a leading cybersecurity ratings platform called Security Scorecard. Today we're going to be talking about the future of supply chain cybersecurity. It's a hot topic, whether you're a security practitioner or not. This is really on the mind of everybody that we speak with. So we're excited to share some of the latest insights that we hear from the market, practitioners, other vendors, business partners, and talk about what does the future of supply chain risk look like and how do we share that vision and really make it a reality. A little bit about myself. Prior to starting Security Scorecard in 2013, I spent my entire career as a security practitioner. I was a chief security officer of an e-commerce company called Gilt Group, which was based in New York. Maybe you've heard of it or your wives, significant others have heard of it. Prior to that, I worked in the automotive industry for many years, both as an individual contributor, as a hacker. I think now it's called red teaming or blue teaming. At the time, it was just called hacking. And I also came up through the regulatory space, working extensively on Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, PCI compliance, and others. So all that to say, I spend a lot of time just thinking about cybersecurity risk and supply chain risk. I want to share with the group today some insights and lessons learned. Over the last 10, 15 years, we've tried a lot to make third-party risk management and supply chain risk management easier and smoother. And unfortunately, it's gone in the other direction. For those of you that own or are intimately involved in any type of cybersecurity due diligence, it's a pain in the butt. So we're trying to make life easier for folks that do it. We're going to talk about insights from the market, as I mentioned, what people are saying they want to make life easier, what worked, didn't work. Then we'll talk about the future. And I'll actually share some real-life examples of how breaches take place by way of a third-party business partner. So we get asked that question all the time. Why is supply chain risk such a big deal? Why is it so hard? Why is it so complex? And how do hackers get in through the business partners? So we'll show exactly how that takes place. Our company and myself, I spend a lot of time with our customers and partners, hundreds of CISOs, CIOs, security practitioners, board members. We're members of World Economic Forum, so we're rubbing elbows with prime ministers of Thailand and Singapore and lots of countries. And we ask folks, leaders of the business world, what keeps you up at night? Not just in cyber, just what keeps you up at night? And the number one feedback, or number two, supply chain security is the number one top business concern. People are terrified. Board members are worried about losing their seats. CEOs are worried about getting fired. CISOs are worried about getting fired, trying to drum up more budget to support a cause that feels a little bit hopeless at this point. Everybody's concerned for different reasons, and supply chain is really sitting at the nexus of a risk management strategy. Now, before I show the next slide, I'm going to ask everybody it's a pop quiz, but it's an easy one. It's like still early, so take a sip of coffee and think about it. Statistically speaking, what percentage of this room, the companies that we represent, are connected with at least one company that has had a breach? So within your third-party supply chain ecosystem, what percentage of this room is connected with at least one company that has had a breach? So if you think 50% of the room, raise your hand. Half the companies, okay, 50%, 60%, raise your hand, 60%, 75%, 80%, okay, 90 plus, okay. The prize is Security Scorecard swag, so you got to go by the booth. If you said 90 plus, you're absolutely correct. And actually, we have some limited edition swag I brought from our last trip to New York, so you can visit our booth if you had your hand up. 98% of organizations globally, statistically speaking, have at least one relationship with a third party that's been breached. You're right, it's everybody. It's unavoidable. What's really interesting, though, is that when we look at origin of a breach, we find about 3/4 of breaches originate from a third-party supplier. They don't originate from our company. It was something someone else did that we didn't have control over. They said they were probably doing the right thing, but they weren't. And the customer doesn't care. They look at us to trust them with their information. So it puts risk practitioners in a really uncomfortable place. But this is reality. Actually, the 75% was affirmed by one of our largest customers where we manage supply chain risk. I won't mention the name, but their mascot is a clown named Ronald who wears red and yellow. And they've got 30,000 plus vendors. All of their breaches happen because of their supply chain. This is why supply chain is such a big concern for folks. We're being held responsible for the security of companies that we don't own or operate, but we're expected to do business with to grow our own line of business. It's a huge opportunity, but the challenge is very complex. When we ask CISOs, risk practitioners, chief risk officers, head of TPRM, what's your utopia, right? What do you actually want to see? This list right here is the list that people are requesting. What's your ideal third-party risk program? It's global, it's security-focused, security-led, not just compliance-led. It's continuous, not just point in time. It drives toward outcomes. Remember, an outcome is not a completed questionnaire or risk assessment. An outcome is a signed contract. It's an acquisition of a company that we were doing cyber due diligence on. It's growth of the business. It's more revenue. It's cost savings. And we've seemed to forget that outcome. We've lost sight of it. People want to see their vendor and supply chain ecosystem security actually improving. It's really hard to measure, let alone get them to improve their health posture. We want to prioritize the things that matter the most within the supply chain. Everybody's inundated with too much data. The real questions are, what are the critical risks? What are the things that could get the SEC looking at our company or potentially fining us based on a supply chain vulnerability? How do we prioritize those? And we want scale. Businesses are not slowing down. We're seeing assessments take place in the tens of thousands every single year, and that's near impossible to do by throwing more humans with more questionnaires. So again, why is third-party risk management so hard? Let's look at some very specific examples, and let's live and put ourselves in the shoes of a risk manager. TPRM is a mess. Third-party risk management is in a completely uncontrolled state right now. You talk to anybody, and they're feeling pain around third-party risk management, whether they have 2 people or 200 people working on it. Why? Incredibly manual process. We're asking people to fill out questionnaires over and over and submit evidence requests. The business is saying, hey, we need to sign more contracts, more vendors, move faster. But those vendors and partners are not moving faster when it comes to due diligence, and it puts risk practitioners in an uncomfortable place. All the evidence and things we collect, it's outdated the day after we sign the contract. We have no idea if the company is doing what they said they were going to do. Really hard to do continuous assessments and audits. There's too many different languages that are being spoken. We're being held accountable now not just for our third parties, but the third parties of the third parties, which are called fourth parties, and the third parties of the fourth parties, which are called fifth parties. Regulators are coming in saying, you have to know your fifth party supply chain partner. Good luck. It's a near impossible exercise without the right technology. And last, and maybe some people can empathize with this, you do business with a large partner like a Cisco, they're probably not going to fill out your custom questionnaire. They're just going to send you a zip file with 5,000 policies, procedures, password policies, firewall policies, everything they do, and they're going to say, read this first before you answer any questions. Who has time to read 5,000 policies by hand? You're going to look at those and say, okay, they probably know what they're talking about. They're Cisco, and sign the contract. So why is it so complex? Why is it so hard? Why does it move so slowly? What we found was there are actually 3 different configurations inside of organizations. There's 3 different reporting structures and ownership structures for third-party risk. And this is all within the B2B enterprise. So you're talking companies that are doing over $1 billion a year, pharmaceutical, healthcare, all industries. They have 3 different models. Some are more mature, some are less mature. This is why when you do business with companies, sometimes they sign a contract really fast and fill out the questionnaire quickly, and other times it takes weeks and weeks. In Model 1, let's go back. In Model 1, this is no dedicated TPRM team. This is 2 guys in IT who are responsible for everything. Endpoint security, firewall, and they're responsible for filling out all the questionnaires. So if you're doing business with those companies, you're chasing after 2 guys for weeks and weeks amongst hundreds of other competing priorities, and hair is always on fire. Model number 2 has a dedicated TPRM team, but it sits outside of the CISO. It sits adjacent in usually the office of the chief risk officer or the chief procurement officer. And the 2 teams talk. There's a movement where we're seeing the rise of the third-party SOC. So you traditionally have first-party SOC. Their door is being knocked on by the third-party risk folks saying, hey, we need more threat intelligence on our vendors, business partners. But there's not a lot of overlap otherwise. So they're just learning how to work together. In Model 3, super mature models, usually we see this in the top banks. Third-party risk and first-party risk all reports into the CISO. There's teams of dozens, sometimes hundreds of dedicated folks running a very highly efficient but still very manual third-party risk program. So it just depends what type of model you get and what kind of funding the company gets. That's usually what determines how fast a third-party cyber due diligence assessment goes. Day in the life of a risk manager. If you've never been a risk manager before, or you have risk managers on your team, this is really an exercise of empathy. So just imagine for yourself, you work at, I don't know, Dropbox. You're the risk manager of Dropbox. The analogy is it's like you're working at a car dealership and you're a car salesperson, and you've got clients coming in all the time asking questions about the vehicle. They ask different questions, but they sound the same, and sometimes they mean the same thing, but they're phrased differently, like, hey, how much horsepower does the car have? Hey, how fast does it go? We're talking about speed. We're asking similar questions. They're not the same, but we're really trying to understand how fast does the car go. Oh, by the way, all your clients speak different languages. So you have to speak 8, 10, 12 different compliance languages every time someone comes in. So they're speaking 10 different languages, asking same and similar and different questions all at the same time. And you're sitting at the center. By the way, you have a compliance function saying, hey, you better make sure you answer that question right. We're watching the answers that you say. You also have the business partners. If I could extend this picture farther, I'd put them in another office down the road. But they're in the corner here saying, it's just a couple questions. What's taking so long? We're trying to sign the contract. Can't you just tell them how fast the horsepower is or show them the window sticker of the car? But the window sticker isn't good enough. So that leaves risk managers in a really uncomfortable position. Now, over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of big bets in the supply chain risk space in terms of technology, solutions, supposed silver bullets that were going to solve supply chain or third-party risk management once and for all. But none of them quite hit the mark. Why not? We saw the idea of risk exchanges, GRXs and risk exchanges. We're all going to fill out the same 300-question questionnaire, and everybody's going to have access to each other's, and then it's going to stop us from filling out questionnaires. Didn't work. Nobody wants to fill out 300 questionnaires. The drop-off is very high. Even if you fill them out or your vendor fills them out, it's outdated. So you're accessing a database, an exchange full of outdated information does not actually help with cybersecurity. GRCs are useful, been around for a long time, help us stay on schedule, manage the risk. They don't actually help accelerate a third-party due diligence, a cyber due diligence assessment. When we want to go faster, they don't help. We try to create many different standards and frameworks. It's almost like an arms race. Now we've got hundreds and hundreds of different frameworks, custom questionnaires. We realize that there is no one-size-fits-all. There is no perfect questionnaire. Every business, every industry has their own tailored needs based on how they're working with somebody else, and we have to adapt the questions that we're asking based on the inherent risk profile of that company. So there is no one questionnaire, one standard, one framework that works for everybody. It doesn't work that way. People demanded regulation, and we saw some. NYDFS, DORA in the UK is now mandating you have to know your fifth-party supply chain, freaking everybody out. It's not enough, though, because what ends up happening is auditors, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Different auditors assess risk differently, and that's generated distrust in the industry. People no longer trust a SOC 2 certification. Auditors and supply chain managers are now asking for the long-form audit of the SOC 2 report, and they're going to go review what did the auditor say. I need to see exactly what they said, what you said. People don't want to share that information, even if you share it. Again, someone has to go review 200-300 questions on a SOC 2. It doesn't scale. Good efforts, good attempts, but they all fell short. This is just a joke, the myth of a universal standard. We watched it for the last 10 years. This is how standards proliferate, like AC chargers, instant messaging, supply chain risk questionnaires. Situation, there are 14 competing standards. 14, ridiculous. We need to develop one universal standard that everyone's going to use for all use cases. Yeah. Situation, soon, there are 15 competing standards. And this is what we've witnessed over and over again every single year. As we thought about it deeper, we asked ourselves and our customers, what the heck is a questionnaire anyway? What is it? What's the anatomy of a questionnaire? Questionnaire, a cyber insurance application, a regulatory control framework. If you really analyze what are all these things that we're filling out, fundamentally they're the same thing. They might be applied differently for different purposes and outcomes. It's the same thing. 2 or 3 parties are it's 2 or 3 people trying to come together to check to see if a bunch of security controls are in place, and they want to have a discussion about it and make sure that they're implemented. That's it. We have overcomplicated something that should be pretty straightforward and direct. So what's the vision? What's the future? Where is supply chain risk, third-party risk, where is it going? What does the market want to see that doesn't exist today, but everybody's demanding it? There's a few things. Automation. The demand for automation has never been higher. So we want risk exchanges. We just don't want to fill out 300 questionnaires in a risk exchange. We want to plug in all of our data, plug in our APIs, and have the risk exchange pull relevant information out of those so we don't have to do anything. We need a 360 view. External attack surface, very helpful view. We also need to know what's going on behind the firewall. The only way to get a comprehensive view of someone's cybersecurity is to have a 360 view. Inside view, which means, are the cybersecurity tools running? Are your cloud instances configured correctly? AWS, Google Cloud, etc. Do you have policies and procedures? Those are all inside views of a company. Outside views, what can a hacker see about you? Are there any 0 days or known exploitable vulnerabilities in the supply chain? Those are hard questions to answer, but coming up more and more. What are the 0 days and what are the CISA known exploitable vulnerabilities? Why do people care about those? Those are the things that the SEC pays attention to. Those are the things that force companies to disclose supply chain breaches in a 10K. So if we want to reduce the likelihood of a SEC knocking on the door or a regulatory fine or a breach, we need to know where are the CISA KEVs in the supply chain, in the third-party ecosystem, in the fourth party, and in the nth party. Questionnaires, I don't think they're going to go away tomorrow as much as everybody would love for them to go away tomorrow. I think they're here to stay at least for the next few years. But the idea is we should never have to fill out a questionnaire from scratch ever again. The idea of starting from zero every single time we want to do an assessment, that needs to become legacy and go away. And what we're doing is we're taking the data that we already see about companies, because there's lots of data on the internet, and we're mapping that to regulatory frameworks. We're mapping that to compliance questionnaires. The idea is maybe we can get an accelerant, a faster time to complete a questionnaire by already filling out what we've already filled out before, reusing it out of our flat files. And then without a doubt, we've heard more and more demand for AI and large language models to be trained on the risk data, on the SOC 2 data, on all of the compliance and regulatory frameworks so that we can leverage the tech to analyze the data on our behalf. The future is probably, at least today, is probably going to look more like interacting with a chatbot, asking questions about a company's risk, than reading long-form questionnaires. And all this to say, again, the outcome is not to fill out a questionnaire faster. We forgot. The outcome is to sign a contract faster, acquire company faster, make more money faster, save more money faster, report all the positive things that we're trying to accomplish to the board, to the C-suite, look good to our peers and our constituents, and look competent. So the whole name of the game is the need for speed. How do we accelerate the due diligence process? How do we compress the life cycle? Again, not removing the things that are helpful, but automating them. We have to hit the diligence milestones faster. What are diligence milestones? Faster upfront collection of artifacts. Stop chasing someone in another company for their policies and procedures. That should be accessible. Faster understanding of the red flags that you care about. If you're using NIST or MITRE or SIG or whatever framework is most relevant to you, you need to understand where could there be potential violations before you go talk to the company. That can be provided upfront. Faster completion of a questionnaire based on other questionnaires we already filled out, based on policies that we already have in-house, that can be contributed to a technology and mapped to the questionnaire so we don't have to fill it out from scratch. And a faster time to decision. Can we do business with this company? How much should we pay to acquire them? Remember, when Verizon was acquiring Yahoo, Yahoo disclosed a double breach during diligence. It lobbed the price in half from $5 billion to $2.5 billion. These are the questions we're trying to answer to help the business go faster. And this applies to all use cases, anywhere where third-party diligence is taking place. So we think about this a lot at Scorecard. How much can you discover on a company before you engage with them? We have over 75,000 companies who have contributed information to their profiles, and we map that to any framework. Tell me the things I care about in the language that I speak. I don't speak technology, I speak NIST, I speak MITRE, I speak SIG. Map those problems to those frameworks so I don't have to translate technology risk into regulatory or business risk. That should be done on everybody's behalf. We're also surfacing 0 days, CISA known exploitable vulnerabilities, CVEs, and other critical problems in any nth party, third party, fourth party, fifth party. We discover and detect in real time. That means companies get a prioritized list of where they need to focus. And of course, questionnaire automation. Give us the questionnaires you already filled out, and we'll fill out any net new questionnaire that you've never filled out, reusing the same responses. So I'll end just in the last couple minutes with some juicy examples of real examples. How do supply chain vendors get hacked? Like when we hear about it in the news, ransomware, this, that, what are the vectors? What are the entry points? We did a case study last year, a couple years ago, and we update it regularly. We took all of the PCI certified service providers, right? These are the folks that have the highest level of certification from the PCI assembly, and we specifically carved out any PCI service providers who are in Latin America. Service providers are folks that they're like a development company that builds apps for banking, or a cryptocurrency wallet, or a payment processor. And they're supposed to be super certified. We found some really interesting things. So these are examples of how companies get hacked due to supply chain. This is example one. Example one is we saw data exfiltration from a PCI certified service provider. They are a crypto provider, and they could issue a Visa debit card that could debit against your crypto wallet. We saw on a server that on their IP, they had some CVEs. Vulnerable version of Apache 2.4.52 was running. That's a no. Remember, this is the safest platform of Latin America for your crypto, running on outdated version of Apache. Guess what? Hackers found that outdated version of Apache, and they exploited it, and they took over that box. And they started doing data exfiltration, probably private keys. We saw, because we have access to NetFlow data, we saw that the IP of the compromised company was phoning home to a known bad actor server where some of the nastiest malware families and bad actors were operating from. Every Monday, 12 megabyte file being exfiltrated from Latin America's most secure crypto wallet provider. Example two, a high-risk facilitator using vulnerable shared hosting. So this company, based in Mexico, does development work for some of the world's largest banks, mobile applications. When they registered their website, they registered on a hosting provider called Liquid Web. And if you ever host a website, you get an option of dedicated hosting or shared hosting. They chose shared hosting. Guess what? They didn't do anything wrong, but all their neighbors had insecure data. Everybody else they were sharing the server with. So hackers compromised the neighbors' houses and then used the neighbor's house to jump through the window into this company's environment. And we saw all these different companies being hosted on the same server, including a PCI compliant service provider. Here are the threat actor groups that we saw operating from that box. Some of the nastiest malware groups, state-sponsored actors compromising PCI compliant developers' servers. Very nasty. A third example, this is, again, name censored. A regional bank built a payment app who leaked application log data that disclosed names, password, test IDs, tokens, endpoints that are not public. So this company had an app that was just leaking application log file data, and they were connecting to the Visa network. So they have default credentials, username and password, the non-public endpoint and API where they're connecting, all disclosed. And the endpoint was live. We checked it. The last example I'll share, and this is just sloppy work, right? So this is, again, a PCI-certified Nigerian payment processor, all sorts of loads of misconfiguration. We discovered an admin panel just running. We discovered an RDP server. We discovered a very outdated version of Microsoft IIS, 12 years old software, 2 years out of service. Microsoft doesn't even support it anymore. Literally, anybody with a computer and a command line terminal could open up and connect to this payment processor. So in conclusion, supply chain risk, third-party cyber risk, nth-party risk, it is sitting at the nexus of all of our business stakeholders, CISOs, chief risk officers, the risk practitioners doing the work, insurance underwriters are also looking for faster ways to perform due diligence, better ways to underwrite and price risk faster. C-suite and executives don't want to lose their board seat due to a breach. They're not technical, so they need a bridge language to help participate in the risk mitigation strategy. And you can see here, these are just different requirements. You can take a picture, different requirements that we hear from each of these different types of profiles. The point is we want to take the diligence process, supplement it with real data, threat intel data, accelerate it, automate it using AI, and standardize, level set this process so we get out of the manual woodwork. Thank you guys. We'll be around all day. We have a booth. Again, if you raised your hand, come by and get your prize. We have socks, hats, other stuff, security scorecard branded, and I look forward to connecting with every one of you today. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.